The presentation is about to be offered for you is provided with the understanding that some persons find that they learn better or retain knowledge better by using more channels of communication of content. You're about to see slides that talk about the executive skills portfolio that are taken specifically from what is detailed in the ESP guidance document on the partnership's website. So let's proceed. The ESP has two sections to it. A sample of work that is showing how you have applied management functions and leadership skills, and how you've incorporated the vision and values of community action in your work setting. The other section, closely aligned with it, are 4 essays in which you relate that sample of your work to specific areas of the body of knowledge outline. That ESP is evaluated and scored by a panel of CCAP commissioners and trained CCAP volunteers to earn you points toward the 700 total you need to qualify to take the CCAP examination. It is due by the 3rd Wednesday of February each year. What that means is that if you expect or want or hope to qualify to take the exam in the current calendar year, that ESP must have been received by the partnership office by the 3rd Wednesday of February. If it's received after that, it is considered only for the following calendar year. The details about the work sample. It must showcase your own work as part of a team or some kind of group effort, but it has to be clear what you did in some kind of leadership role related to that particular project or program or work. The work that you described that you did may not have come to conclusion more than 3 years before the date of your enrollment as a CCAP candidate. So if you enrolled, let's say, in the fall of 2021, that means that that project couldn't have been finished any earlier than 3 years before that, December of 2018. Not begun, but finished. And that particular work sample must demonstrate your use of the traditional management functions of planning, organizing, directing, and evaluating. And in a document that will serve as an introduction to your work sample, you are expected to provide the following information. What is the exact purpose? What's the goal of this work? What were you trying to accomplish? And a specific description of your role in producing that work, expecting that your role is in some way related to a group of people working on that project in one way or another. The budget for the project, if there is one, and any documents that come from that work that show the results. We'll take a look at now specifically at the second part of it, the 4 essays. Note, there is a maximum limit for each essay of 750 words. This means that you're required to succinctly relate your work sample to specific 3 areas in the body of knowledge outline. Outline B is on vision and values of community action. Outline C is on traditional management functions, and D is on leadership. And to relate that specific work sample to the partnership standards of excellence. We're going to look at each of those essays in more detail and what's required. But this is something that covers all of them. And very important, as you'll hear now, and is made very visible to you when you look at the guidelines on the partnership's website. You must refer to specific pages in your work sample as evidence for any claims you're making in each of these essays that you write. If you don't make specific linkage to specific pages, you will lose points on your portfolio, significant percentage of points. Let's take a look at essay number 1, traditional management functions. Referencing those specific pages in your work sample that are evidence, explain how that sample shows that you have understood and applied these traditional management functions in the specific areas of planning, organizing, directing, and evaluating. It's very possible that you might be stronger in one of them than the other. That's understood, but you need to pay attention to each of them. And you'll see on the ESP guidelines that are on the partnerships webpage some samples of what you might consider activities that equal planning, defining goals, using tools like community action plan or budgets, or learning from historical evidence, etc. What might be the way you are involved in planning for that particular work, and what ways might you have been involved in organizing that work? That might include some of the items you see on this list. These are not meant to be an exhaustive coverage of all the possible items that could be included. It's just a sample to kind of prime the pump for your thinking. Directing. Perhaps you delegated. Perhaps you did a lot of the decision making, or you needed to effectively communicate to those who had responsibilities, whatever might be your way of directing and your way of evaluating, measuring performance in relationship to established goals. So that's an assist and the guidelines to help you think about what were the traditional management skills that you used. As you consider what work sample, again, I'll restate this, that you are going to choose, make sure that that work sample can relate to these essays and that you can refer back to the work sample as you answer them. That's the first item. The second item, the second essay, is on leadership skills. Again, by referencing specific pages, you are asked how your work on that particular project or program or task has in some way influenced a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. You've acted in some way as an influencer for a group to get to a common goal. That's the point. Now, that definition that leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal is a summary of the history of important leadership theories that is made by Peter Northouse, the author of Leadership Theory and Practice. That is the definition we use to understand leadership throughout the CCAP process. And the candidates who are submitting an executive skills portfolio are expected to be familiar with those two specific chapters in the Northouse text. And notice it can either be from the 8th edition in 2019 or the 9th edition in 2021. Now, there are three parts to this essay. First, clearly basing your response either on a skills-focused approach as described by Peter Northouse in Chapter 3, or a situational-focused approach, or both, which is situations described in Northouse Chapter 5. You're to explain why your involvement in that project should be considered a demonstration of your leadership, where the focus may have been on the skills that you needed to use, where the focus may be on the situation that required specific format for leadership. Whichever best fits your particular work sample and the kind of influencing that you did for that group. That's the first part of this essay. The second is to choose one out of the 9 items that we'll look to in a moment that are listed under Body of Knowledge Outline D2 or D3. Consider which one of them, of those 9 items, you think best correlates to your leadership role in that project. Remembering to reference the page in your work sample that makes visible the claims that you are making. Explain why you made that specific choice in the body of knowledge outline to showcase your leadership. And your citations are your evidence of that. Let's take a look at D2 and D3. Right from the body of knowledge outline. D2 is on fundamental practices of exemplary leadership. D3 is on forward-thinking leadership skill sets. And as you look through that list, think about the project you just did and reflect which one of these particular functions of leadership is most connected to what I have done in my way of influencing this project. Okay, choose one. Third, now choose one out of the 14 items that are listed under body of knowledge outline D4 or D5, the same, that best correlates to your leadership role in this work sample. Again, explain why you made that choice and cite the pages that are evidence that illustrate your exploration for choosing that one item. Let's take a look. This is what's in D4. D4 is a section of body knowledge outline that addresses ethical considerations for community action leadership. Is one of these consistent with what, or rather a good identifier for my leadership under D4? That might work. My professional competence maybe, or is it promotion, professional development, colleagues? Maybe it's that. Let me take a look at D5, because maybe that's a better one, because I can choose one among any of those two, D4 or D5. Now, D5 is on community action values becoming real through responsible leadership for empowering individuals and families and facilitating revitalization of communities, maximum peaceful participation, appropriate effective advocacy. And now this one feels like it's best. Our program clearly is empowering individuals and families, and that's the kind of leadership I've shown. Let's say that would be my choice. That's just an example of how you would look through that list. Okay. Essay 3 asks you now to explain how the work sample shows that you understand and have used the vision and values of community action. This one, again, you need to cite the pages, but it's a little different because here, for Essay 3, you will see on the last page of the ESP Guidelines a cross-reference check sheet. You use that check sheet to indicate specifically which particular items under Section B on visionary concepts, values and beliefs, and which ones of those specifically relate to that project that I was involved in. Be careful, and you'll hear this repeated in the guidelines, not to overreach. Some candidates tend to mark all of them. Well, it's really impossible to write a 750-word essay and justify 22 choices. So figure the ones that are most accurate about the work you've done. Here's a sample of 6 items that were chosen by someone who was a director of community relations and public relations and communication in an agency. The 6 that best were the values, vision and values made visible in that particular project. And note that left-hand column, the specific pages from the work sample that are used as evidence. Candidates must use that cross-reference check sheet when addressing essay number 3. Essay number 4, demonstrate how your work sample contributes to your agency's attainment or enhancement of one of the partnership's standards of excellence, or how it might have the capacity to contribute to that. How could that help the agency move toward being a more excellent agency. And again, you must reference pages in your work sample that are evidence of that claim. Now, let's get to some specific guidance about these submissions. Let's get to more practical details. I think we've said it many times, but it's important to be repeated, making sure that you reference specific pages and use the mandatory worksheet for Essay 3 on vision and values. In your introductory materials, if the evaluator and your work sample, if the evaluator cannot determine what you did, either by yourself or by being a part of a team's effort, what you did in the work sample, it will be disqualified. You need to make that clear in what you present to the evaluators. And if the evaluator cannot determine that the work was completed within that required 3-year time limit, your work will be disqualified. That is, if the project was completed, your work done more than 3 years before your candidacy. The format. This is the specific way you submit it. First, the descriptive materials. You might well consider these as headings to your document. What's the purpose of my work? My leadership role in the work? A budget, if there is one, and documents about the results of this program, if there are any. Then the document which describes the work. And you'll see in the guidelines it's specific about what kinds of documents can be used. And then finally, the 4 essays, including that worksheet for essay number 3. Some practical details, in more detail. Assemble all the documents and scan them into one PDF, if that's at all possible. Because these ESPs have to be sent to evaluators, and the more there are documents to be sent, the more that clogs up the system. So in one PDF, and send that PDF as an attachment to Mitzi Hubbard at Community Action Partnership. Mitzi Hubbard's email address is right there. Now, in some instances, a PDF may be very graphic laden and then larger than 15 gigs. In that instance, we advise using Dropbox or Google Docs and then send the link to the same email address. All ESP submissions will be acknowledged as they are received. If you don't receive acknowledgement within 3 days of that submission, send an email inquiry. It may have gone into spam. It may have had a mistake in the email address, but you wouldn't know that unless you inquire why you haven't heard that it's been received. So, as I mentioned, the ESP guidelines are on the partnership website. And you'll see the drop-down menu, closer look, CCAP documents. And you'll see the drop-down menu for Executive Skills Portfolio. You click on that, you will see in the Executive Skills Portfolio the actual current ESP guidelines. This was a picture taken from the 2021 page of the partnership, but it's the same for any year. You click for the current guide, where it's highlighted, there's a hyperlink, the word here, and then the ESP guidelines for the current year will show. And what you have heard in this presentation, you will see printed in detail. If you have questions about what is contained in this presentation or in the ESP guidelines that are posted on the partnership website, contact our CCAP program administrator, Mitzi Hubbard, at the address that you see here. So this gives you the information you need to carefully prepare and develop your portfolio and send it to the partnership. I hope this has been a helpful addition to other ways that you have been guided towards becoming a successful CCAP. Thanks for being here. Bye now.